なことなら母さんに遅くなるって伝えとくべきだったな。
Today, we're diving straight into the next chapter of Hunter Sung Jin-Woo's unstoppable rise. Back on the ground, the scavenger guild stormed the factory, a tidal wave of elite hunters. Thomas stood at the front, his presence unshaken. But Jin-Woo, undeterred, raised a hand. The air seemed to thicken. Shadows erupted across the floor like smoke, swirling, alive and ready. One after another, the Shadow Army emerged, knights, beasts, giants, forming an unstoppable tide of darkness. The ground trembled beneath their sheer presence, and across the battlefield, Thomas grinned. For the first time in a long while, he had found someone who didn't fear his strength, someone who didn't kneel. This wasn't about Dong-Su anymore, it was about pride. The fight was no longer just about victory, it was about reclaiming what he had lost, his pride. And the only way to do that was by killing Jin-Woo right here, right now. There was no going back. Thomas knew this well. That's why he offered Jin-Woo one last chance. His voice rang out, taunting, urging the man to admit his mistakes, to back off, to apologize. In return, Thomas promised to spare his life, but Jin-Woo didn't move. He stood still, his expression cold, unreadable. Slowly, deliberately, he raised his middle finger toward the world's strongest hunter. That was the final straw. Fury exploded through Thomas as Jin-Woo's blatant disrespect shattered every ounce of restraint he had left. His voice trembled with rage as he growled, "You'll regret not taking your last chance." The air crackled with violent energy as his body surged with power, his shirt ripped apart, muscles swelling, hardening like armor. The ground beneath him cracked open, a terrifying force radiating from his very being. Behind both men, their forces gathered, locked in place, waiting. The tension in the air was palpable, thick with the anticipation of what was about to come. And then, the moment the orders were given, all hell broke loose. The Scavenger Guild moved first. Their front lines raised shields infused with mana, creating a shimmering wall of defense. They formed a tight barricade, bracing for impact. But Jin-Woo's Shadow Army surged forward like a tidal wave of darkness. Nearly 1,000 shadows collided with hundreds of top-tier hunters, shaking the ground with each bone-crushing impact. Magic erupted, fists collided, and the battlefield became a storm of chaos. Thomas, unbothered by the chaos around him, tore through the battlefield with terrifying precision. His path cut straight toward Tusk, the massive shadow mage who had been waiting, arms raised to summon a thick, magical barrier. But Thomas didn't slow. He slammed his fist into the ground, propelling himself skyward, and came crashing down with the force of a meteor. The magical wall shattered like glass under his might, and with one brutal strike, he tore Tusk's head clean off. The body collapsed in a heap, lifeless, while Thomas hovered above the wreckage, a sneer on his face. As the chaos continued to spread, Thomas mocked Jin-Woo's forces from above. Without another word, he smashed down through the factory roof, sending debris flying in every direction. Inside, the air was thick with the tension of violence, the battle between power and defiance, each side pushing forward, determined to be the last standing. The Scavenger Guild was being overrun. Thomas watched as his elite squad crumbled beneath the relentless tide of shadows. Everywhere he looked, his warriors were torn apart, their strength no match for the darkness that surged across the battlefield. At the heart of it all stood Jin-Woo, eyes cold, not with fury, but with something far worse. Thomas charged forward without hesitation, his every step shaking the ground beneath him. But before he could close the distance to his target, a figure stepped into his path. Iron, the towering knight. Iron stood firm, raising his shield to meet the incoming onslaught. But Thomas wasn't slowed. With a single brutal punch, he drove his fist through Iron's shield, shattering it like paper, and flung the knight across the room as if he weighed nothing. His eyes snapped back to Jin-Woo, but the man was gone. A flicker of black, a blur of shadow, and then Jin-Woo was there, standing silently beside him. In the blink of an eye, the demon monarch's dagger was plunged into Thomas's abdomen, but instead of cutting through flesh, the blade scraped along his hardened skin, its edge unable to pierce his armor. Jin-Woo's eyes flickered with a hint of surprise at the sight, but Thomas didn't give him a moment to capitalize on it. He swung with all his might, his punch landing flush with Jin-Woo's chest. The force of it sent the man flying across the factory floor, crashing into the ground with a resounding thud. Thomas stood tall, a smirk spreading across his face as he spat. "You made the mistake of looking down on a national-level hunter," he growled. He raised a hand, and an invisible force shot out, gripping Jin-Woo mid-air. The air around them crackled as Thomas's voice, cold as ice, boomed. "Feel the difference in strength, feel despair." But instead of struggling, Jin-Woo didn't bend. His power surged outward like a tempest. Ruler's authority erupted from him, slamming into Thomas like the weight of the world itself. The ground cracked beneath Thomas's feet, the air growing heavy with the pressure. Thomas blinked in disbelief. Jin-Woo wasn't resisting the pull, he was overpowering it. Before Thomas could react, Jin-Woo blurred forward, moving with deadly speed. His punch smashed into Thomas's face with bone-crushing force, and for the first time in his life, Thomas tasted his own blood. His head snapped back as blood sprayed from his mouth. Jin-Woo's voice cut through the storm of battle, a mocking edge to his tone as he rushed in again. What happened to all that talk about despair? The barrage of punches was relentless. Thomas found himself stumbling back, his feet dragging as Jin-Woo's precision forced him to struggle just to keep up. Every blow was calculated, deliberate, and brutal. Shocked by the unrelenting speed and power behind each strike, Thomas realized for the first time that he had grossly underestimated this opponent. Blood dripping from his mouth, his chest heaving, Thomas's eyes blazed with fury. He snarled the single word, "Reinforcements." At that moment, the air around him shifted. Thomas's body swelled, growing past 3 meters tall, muscles bulging as golden armor covered his form. Black horns twisted back from his head, and his hair blazed like wildfire, the very air around him pulsing with raw power. Jin-Woo's thoughts raced back to Kamish's warning, the whispered tale of 4 humans who had borrowed power from the rulers. A chill ran down his spine as the truth settled in. Thomas Andre was no ordinary man. He was a force of nature. As Jin-Woo watched Thomas, the realization hit him like a bolt of lightning. These were the national-level hunters, beings imbued with mystical powers, titans of the human world. And Thomas Andre, unmistakably, was one of them. But despite the overwhelming power radiating from Thomas, Jin-Woo didn't falter. His gaze hardened as he launched himself forward, closing the distance between them in a heartbeat. Thomas, however, had other plans. With a roar, he slammed his fists into the ground, sending shockwaves rippling through the earth. The force tore through the terrain, obliterating everything in its path. Jin-Woo leaped back at the last moment, narrowly avoiding the devastating blast. He landed lightly on his feet, eyes locked on his opponent, but Thomas wasn't done. A moment later, a gravitational field sprang to life around Thomas, drawing everything toward him in a deadly vortex. Jin-Woo's shadows were torn apart, dragged into the spiraling maelstrom, distorted and scattered in the air. But Jin-Woo didn't relent. His power flared, and he pushed back, resisting the pull, his muscles straining against the force as he summoned his own will to keep him grounded. Thomas's eyes burned with cold determination as he built up mana above his head, shaping it into a massive energy sphere. Without warning, he released it. The sphere exploded into a blinding flash, carving out a massive crater in its wake. The blast consumed everything in its radius, annihilating the landscape in a single instant. Jin-Woo landed just beyond the crater's edge, crouching low as the air trembled with the aftermath of the explosion. His eyes never left Thomas, his posture unwavering despite the chaos. Thomas stood at the center of the crater, panting heavily. His voice rang out, icy and cold. "I won't miss next time." At the edge of the battlefield, the Vice Guild Master of the Scavenger Guild shouted orders for retreat. "Get the wounded out! Fall back now!" he barked, his voice full of urgency. But Thomas, filled with rage, paid no mind. He charged again, his body moving like a juggernaut as he barreled toward Jin-Woo. Jin-Woo met him head-on. As Thomas lunged, Jin-Woo kicked upward, smashing his foot into Thomas's head and sending him flying across the ground. The force of the blow cratered the earth beneath him, but Thomas wasn't finished. He quickly activated another gravitational pull, drawing Jin-Woo into the vortex once again. This time, however, Jin-Woo was prepared. With a surge of ruler's authority, he accelerated, moving faster than humanly possible. In a blur, he blasted toward Thomas with explosive speed. Their fists collided in a deafening crash, the sound reverberating across the battlefield. The impact was so powerful that even Thomas's reinforced armor cracked under the pressure. The force of Jin-Woo's punch sent Thomas hurtling through the air, crashing through a factory wall with a thunderous roar, debris and steel flying in all directions. Jin-Woo landed lightly on his feet, calm and focused, as though he had merely brushed aside a slight inconvenience. His eyes were sharp, every movement calculated. Thomas, however, was not finished. Emerging from the rubble, he roared with rage, his fury pushing him forward with reckless abandon. His muscles bulged as he charged again, swinging his fist with the intent to crush his foe. Jin-Woo's eyes flashed with precision. He ducked beneath the wild swing, narrowly avoiding the shock wave that followed. In a blur of motion, he grabbed Thomas by the horns, his grip firm and unyielding. With one fluid movement, he drove his knee into Thomas's face with devastating force, the sound of cracking armor echoing through the factory. The sound of screeching tires echoed through the air as Hunter Bureau vehicles arrived on the scene, coming to a violent halt. The doors flew open and agents flooded out, their faces frozen in stunned disbelief. The overwhelming magical pressure that filled the air was suffocating, paralyzing them where they stood. In the midst of it all, a massive figure crashed violently to the ground, the earth trembling beneath the impact. Adam's eyes widened in horror, his face drained of color as he instantly recognized the wreckage and the man within it. It was Thomas Andre. The sight was unimaginable. No one had ever seen a national-level hunter brought to this state. And yet there he was, being thoroughly beaten by none other than Sung Jin-Woo. Thomas, struggling to rise, tried to push himself up from the rubble, but Jin-Woo was already on him. His punches came down like hammers, each one landing with brutal precision. Every strike targeted a vulnerable point, wearing Thomas down, pushing him closer to the edge of collapse. Doubt and confusion gnawed at Thomas's mind. How could someone like Jin-Woo, a mage-type hunter, move with such speed, deliver such raw power? It defied logic, but it was happening right before his eyes. Blood filled his mouth, but his pride wouldn't let him quit. With blood-stained teeth, he clenched his jaw and bellowed, his voice shaking with defiance. "I am Thomas Andre! This will never be enough to bring me down." But Jin-Woo didn't stop. In the blink of an eye, he shifted behind Thomas, elbowing him viciously in the neck. The towering warrior crashed back to the ground, his body crashing into the earth with a thundering force. Jin-Woo's voice, cold and detached, cut through the chaos. "I don't care who you are!" The Hunter Bureau agents and scavenger hunters stood frozen in horror, their eyes wide in disbelief. None of them dared to intervene. They could do nothing but watch helplessly as their most powerful ally, someone they had all revered, was being crushed before them. Adam, desperate, sprinted forward, his voice desperate as he shouted, "Jin-Woo!
Stop! Please, end it!" But Jin-Woo didn't pause. His attacks kept coming, relentless and precise. Thomas's armor was now shattered, and his torso lay fully exposed. Blood dripped from his face.
His strength fading fast, Thomas could barely stay upright, just as Jin-Woo prepared to unleash one final, devastating blow. Thomas, barely conscious, parted his lips. The words came out slow, fragile, but unmistakable. He had surrendered. His body collapsed, the will to fight drained completely. It was over. Jin-Woo froze, his fist clenched in mid-air. Then after a moment he slowly lowered his hand and stood motionless over the fallen warrior. The silence was deafening. No one spoke. No one moved. Spectators stood paralyzed, struggling to process what they had just witnessed. Thomas Andre, the Titan, the indomitable national-level hunter, was lying broken, motionless on the ground. A man once considered a symbol of unstoppable power now looked human. Defeated. For Adam, the scene was especially staggering. Who could possibly beat Thomas Andre? Had anyone ever come this close before? In all his years at the Bureau, he had never seen anything like this. And now, as reality hit him like a jolt of lightning, he understood the gravity of it. Once the world hears of Thomas Andre's defeat, everything would change. Snapping back into action, Adam urgently summoned the healers. One of the highest ranking among them rushed to Thomas's side, checking his vitals before quickly beginning the healing incantation. His face tightened the moment he realized the extent of the damage. Thomas's condition was catastrophic. Shattered bones, blood everywhere, life itself was slipping away. The healer immediately called for backup. His magic alone wouldn't be enough. As the healers fought to keep Thomas alive, the Hunter Bureau's emergency teams flooded the ruined battlefield, rescuing the injured, assessing structural damage, and restoring order. In the middle of it all, Adam stood quietly, absorbing the magnitude of what had unfolded. Considering how far south this could have gone, he thought, this may have been the best-case scenario. And yet, the sheer violence, the savage intensity of the battle, it couldn't be erased. Then an officer sprinted toward him, panic written all over his pale face. The news hit like a hammer's rank. Hunter Huang Dongsu wasn't breathing. Far from the destruction, seated atop a tall building with a perfect view of the Seoul skyline, Jin-Woo sat in silence, gazing down at the city below. Jin-Woo had returned in an instant, using Shadow Exchange to switch places with Beru, who remained behind in America, tasked with healing Jinho to the best of his ability. As his mind wandered through the fading echoes of the brutal fight, a voice pierced the stillness, deep, powerful, and unfamiliar. "My king." Jin-Woo turned toward the source of the voice. Kneeling before him was a massive figure cloaked in darkness. A shadow soldier, its energy pulsing with the unmistakable presence of a knight-class commander. Head bowed in deference, the soldier humbly asked for a name. Jin-Woo studied him in silence, recognizing the face behind the shadows. It was one he knew well, the same man whose final moments had been consumed by pride and greed. "Greed," Jin-Woo finally said. "It suits you." His voice was cold, detached. Then, locking eyes with the figure beneath the shadows, he asked plainly, "So, Huang Dong-su, do you like your new name?" said the former S-rank hunter, now nothing more than a soldier in the Shadow Army, bowed even lower, gratefully acknowledging his new identity. Jin-Woo's expression didn't shift. "Now lower your head to the ground," and just like that the conversation ended. His eyes turned back toward the glowing skyline of Korea. The battle was over. But the war, that was just beginning. The next day, United States, the International Guild Conference was finally underway. A prestigious global event, now made even more high-profile by the arrival of its most unexpected guest, Sung Jin-Woo. Flanked by the Deputy Director of the Hunter Bureau, Jin-Woo stepped into the venue as a wave of flashing lights greeted him at the entrance. Reporters surged forward, cameras firing like machine guns. The buzz was electric. Confused by the sudden attention, Jin-Woo leaned over and asked, "What's with all the noise?" The Deputy Director gave a small smile. "Word got out about your fight with Thomas Andre. From now on, avoiding the spotlight won't be an option." Jin-Woo frowned slightly. "You're the face of this entire conference now," the deputy added. He also reassured Jin-Woo. The testimonies from Huang Dong-su's team had been clear. There was no wrongdoing on Jin-Woo's part. The truth would come out soon enough. But Jin-Woo wasn't thinking about Dong-su anymore. Not even a little. The chaos, the rumors, the rising tide of speculation, none of it mattered to Jin-Woo. He hadn't come to America for attention or politics. He came for answers. And once he had them, he had no intention of staying a moment longer. As they reached the conference center, the deputy director handed Jin-Woo a discreet earpiece. "I'll translate everything for you during the event," he said. Jin-Woo nodded silently, slipping the device into place. The moment he stepped through the main doors, the atmosphere shifted. Conversations ground to a halt. Heads turned, every pair of eyes locked onto him. Some of the hunters and officials watched with fascination, others with caution. But the dominant feeling in the air was something far heavier, awe mingled with unease. After all, the man now walking calmly into the room was the one who had taken down Thomas Andre, one of the world's most powerful national-level hunters. Whispers swirled across the room like wind through dry leaves. "That's him. The guy who beat Thomas? He cleared the S-rank gate in Tokyo too, didn't he? Is he even human?" But Jin-Woo didn't acknowledge any of it. He walked straight to his seat and sat down with calm, quiet poise. The conference officially began. A figure took the stage, introducing himself as Dr. Belzer, the leading researcher at the Global Gate Authority. Without wasting a second, he launched into the presentation, explaining the growing concern that had drawn the world's top hunters and officials together. Across the globe, the number of gates was increasing at an unprecedented rate. With them came stronger, deadlier monsters. But there was something else, something far more unsettling. A new phenomenon had been detected in the upper atmosphere. Unusual concentrations of magical energy growing rapidly. They called it the Magisphere. Behind Dr. Belzer, a world map flared to life, pulsing with colored energy. It displayed 9 distinct regions where this magical concentration was most intense. 9. Exactly the number of monarchs, but one hotspot outshined all the rest: South Korea. The moment Dr. Belzer said the words, the room's attention snapped back to Jin-Woo. The whispers returned, louder, more urgent now. Tension crackled like static, but Dr. Belzer raised a hand, urging calm. "If Hunter Sung Jin-Woo truly is the source of this Magisphere," he said, "then he may not just be a hunter anymore. He might be something else entirely." Jin-Woo didn't respond. He remained silent, deep in thought. Could it be? Were these surges of magic tied to the Monarchs? Was the Magisphere just another sign of the war to come? Dr. Belzer concluded by admitting the truth. We still don't know what's causing this, or how to stop it. Whatever was coming, it would change the world forever. The air inside the conference hall was already tense, but it grew heavier as Dr. Belzer stepped away and the director of the Hunter Bureau, David Brennan, walked onto the stage. His expression was grim, his voice low and deliberate. "I'm afraid I must deliver urgent news." The room fell into stillness. Christopher Reed is dead. A wave of shock rippled through the audience like an earthquake. Stifled exclamations. Even the elite among them couldn't believe what they had just heard. Christopher Reed, one of the most powerful national-level hunters in the world, assassinated. Whispers surged like wildfire. Impossible. Who could even kill someone like Christopher Reed?
Then slowly, cautiously, the eyes in the room drifted again toward Jin-Woo. He had just defeated Thomas Andre. Now Christopher was dead. Coincidence? David raised his hand to stop the storm of rumors before it could explode. "Do not jump to conclusions," he said firmly. "The Bureau has already identified a suspect." The murmurs died off instantly. Jin-Woo's eyes narrowed as the giant screen behind David flickered to life. A face appeared. The man shown was not him. And yet, he looked nearly identical. The resemblance was uncanny, down to the posture, the expression, the eyes. Confusion washed over the audience. Was it Jin-Woo? A clone? A shapeshifter? A relative? Jin-Woo's gaze sharpened. His jaw clenched. Why? Why did he look like his father? Questions raced through his mind. He remembered Kamish's words, how 4 humans had once borrowed the power of the rulers. He remembered how dungeons were tied to the ruler's domain, and now his father had reappeared. Was this connected?
Why would a ruler send someone who looked like his father? What was his father hiding? David Brennan continued speaking, his voice grave. He revealed that this suspect, S, had been seen months earlier, during the chaos surrounding Hwang Dong-su's disappearance. Surveillance footage had captured the moment an entire section of the Bureau's headquarters went up in flames. The footage began to play. On screen, Suspect S stood over Dong-su's broken body, surrounded by fire, shadow, and silence. Jin-Woo didn't move. He didn't need to. From behind him, a voice whispered within the depths of his mind. It was greed. The once proud S-rank hunter, who now served as a shadow, and he confirmed it. The man in the footage was real, and he wasn't Jin-Woo. There was no doubt anymore. The man in the footage was his father. Jin-Woo sat motionless as director David Brennan continued his announcement, his words cutting through the murmurs like a blade. The association would enlist every guild on Earth to locate and apprehend the suspect. Any confirmed sightings were to be reported immediately, but the questions came fast, heavy, and sharp. Is there any proof that Suspect S isn't human? One hunter asked. David nodded grimly. His magical signature doesn't belong to any known hunter. It matches that of a monster. A ripple of unease spread through the hall. Another question followed, more cautious. If he's a threat, why isn't his identity being revealed to the public? David hesitated. Then came the answer, measured but heavy with implication. Because he is connected to one of the hunters present in this room. Whispers surged again, louder now. Speculation ran wild. From the back row, a tall figure rose. Lu Jiagang, China's 7-star hunter, a national-level titan. He didn't bother with subtlety. What is the nature of Suspect S's connection to Hunter Sung Jin-Woo? The room went still again. David took a breath, and then he said it. During interrogation, the suspect claimed to be Hunter Sung's father. Silence shattered like glass. Gasps echoed from every direction. Eyes darted toward Jin-Woo, some in shock, some in sympathy, others in fear. Then Lu Jiagang looked directly at him and voiced the question no one else dared to ask. If that man truly is your father, and the world's hunters try to take him down, what will you do? There was no hesitation in Jin-Woo's reply. His voice was calm, controlled, but the chill in his words made the room freeze. If he's a monster, then he must be hunted, and I'll do it myself. A pause, then came the edge. But his eyes glinted with something darker, an oath carved from fire and shadow. If he's truly my father, and not a monster, I'll protect him. He looked up, gaze sharp as blades, and I'll hunt down anyone who tries to harm my family, even if I must become the enemy of every hunter in the world. The room fell into stunned silence. No one dared to challenge that resolve. As the International Guild Conference finally ended, Jin-Woo stepped out of the building and into the fading sunlight. Waiting near the exit was Adam White, eyes filled with quiet concern. He approached cautiously. "Did you really mean what you said back there?"
he asked softly. Jin-Woo didn't flinch. He didn't even look away. He simply nodded once. Yes. Adam let out a soft chuckle, part awe, part disbelief. "There are only 2 hunters in the entire world," he said quietly, "who would dare say something like that in front of this many powerful hunters." He gave a faint, embarrassed smile and gestured vaguely. "The other one is currently lying in a hospital bed." Instantly, Jin-Woo's mind flashed to the broken but defiant figure of Thomas Andre, battered yet unyielding. Trying to lighten the mood, Adam suggested Jin-Woo join the banquet hosted by the Hunters Association later that evening. But Jin-Woo's attention drifted. A heavy, commanding aura approached. It was Lu Jiagang, the Chinese 7-star hunter, followed by a small group of subordinates. The atmosphere shifted instantly. Conversations died down. Every eye turned to the towering figure. Lu stepped forward, his voice calm but resolute, speaking rapidly in Mandarin. Jin-Woo turned slightly, expression unreadable, and asked Adam for a translation.
Adam listened closely, then relayed the message. Lu had recently battled a giant monster off the coast of China, a beast Jin-Woo had supposedly allowed to escape. Jin-Woo remained silent, calm as stone. Adam hurried on, translating Lu's words. The battle had been brutal, fought on the open sea with waves crashing and fury all around. Lu admitted he had been caught off guard by the monster's overwhelming power. For a long time, he had wondered what kind of hunter could take on such creatures with such ease. Now, standing before Jin-Woo, he finally had his answer. Lu extended a strong hand, offering a firm handshake. "I have wanted to meet you for a while," he said with quiet respect. He added that he was glad Thomas Andre had been put in his place and had no doubt that Thomas had been in the wrong. Jin-Woo looked at him with new eyes. His first impression of Lu had been of a grumpy, rigid man with a stern attitude, but now, hearing his words, he found Lu far more intriguing, someone who carried strength and honor beneath the surface. The 2 hunters shook hands firmly. Just as Lu turned to leave, he paused. He uttered one last sentence in Mandarin, a cryptic parting word that hung in the air like a challenge. Adam's eyes narrowed slightly as he translated Lu Jiagong's final words. His voice dropped, hushed just enough to draw Jin-Woo in closer. Lu said, "He hopes Suspect S isn't someone related to your family." The silence that followed was heavy, as if those words carried the weight of an unspoken warning. Lu Jiagong and his team quietly slipped away, leaving the tension lingering in the air. Adam gave a reassuring nod. "Lu Jiagong doesn't seem to hold any ill will. In fact, he said he never wanted to fight you." Moments later, David Brennan returned and motioned for Jin-Woo to follow him. They walked down a quiet, dimly lit corridor toward a private meeting room. Jin-Woo's eyes narrowed in surprise when he saw who was waiting inside. There, seated calmly on a sofa, was Norma Selner. He hadn't expected to see her again. Without hiding his curiosity, Jin-Woo asked, "What business do you have with me?" Norma's voice was steady, but beneath it lay a faint edge of unease. "I've been having recurring dreams," she said quietly. Visions, disturbing visions, where the world's top hunters were being hunted down one by one. The worst part? Every time she had these dreams, the events unfolded only days later. Her words hung heavily between them. Jin-Woo's voice dropped, low and careful. Was Christopher Reed among them?
David nodded grimly. We warned him, but he didn't listen. You know how that ended. Norma's expression tightened with concern. The hunters, those pillars of strength humanity depends on, they're going to keep dying, she said. The force hunting them won't stop until every last one is eliminated. Jin-Woo's eyes narrowed as he took in the gravity of her message. Are you here to warn me of the same fate? Norma shook her head. Number not to warn you. She looked directly at him. I'm here to ask for your help, for the first time. Confusion flickered beneath Jin-Woo's composed exterior. Norma continued, I want you to protect the hunters who are still alive. She confessed she had tried desperately to remember the faces of the culprits from her dreams. But no matter how hard she tried, the memories slipped through her grasp like smoke. So she decided to take a different approach, to use her ability within the dream itself to identify them. Jin-Woo's mind drifted back to their last encounter. He finally understood why Norma Selner had looked so intently into his eyes that day. She had been searching for something hidden deep within him. Her voice trembled as she recounted that moment. There was a voice, she whispered, an entity speaking from within you. Jin-Woo's brow furrowed, and he asked quietly, What did it say?
Norma lowered her gaze, visibly shaken. It told me to go back and prepare for war. The words struck Jin-Woo like a blade of ice slicing through his chest. His mind raced. He recalled the King of Giants' warnings, the battle looming between the rulers and the monarchs. Could the hunters' deaths be the opening moves in that larger conflict? Trying to make sense of it all, Jin-Woo asked, Why me? Why choose me to protect the others? Norma's answer was immediate, unwavering. I saw power in you, the same overwhelming energy I see in my dreams. Jin-Woo's eyes narrowed as realization dawned. She meant the power of the Shadow Monarch. If that power coursed through the hunters' killers too, then those attackers must be monarchs themselves. David's voice cut through the heavy silence. The threat you face, he said gravely, is beyond anything normal hunters can handle. These beings operate on a different level entirely. We need someone like you, Jin-Woo, powerful enough to stop them. David's tone grew firm, almost pleading. The Bureau will offer you anything in return, even the rune stone left behind by the dragon. Kamish. He fixed Jin-Woo with a serious look. These hunters, they aren't just powerful. They are essential, the last barrier protecting humanity. If they fall, there will be nothing left to stop the catastrophes to come. Jin-Woo sat silently, weighing every word. After a long moment, his voice was steady but firm. He declined. David stared at Jin-Woo, disbelief etched deep into his face. Is this rejection? Because of some grudge against Thomas Andre after your clash?
He asked, voice edged with shock. Jin-Woo shook his head calmly. No, he said quietly, but firmly. The truth is simpler and far more important. He met David's eyes. I still don't know who the real enemy is. Until I understand that, I can't commit to anything. Rising smoothly from his seat, Jin-Woo turned toward the door. But just as his hand reached for the handle, he paused, something tugging at him, an instinct. Without looking back, he called out, "Adam." When Adam approached, Jin-Woo said, "Give me the list of hunters the Bureau wants me to protect." Then, almost as an afterthought, he added, "And arrange meetings with them." Adam's eyes lit up, relief flooding his expression. "I'll get right on it," he said, voice eager. The final day of the International Guild Conference was alive with energy. The banquet hall sparkled under grand chandeliers filled with the strongest hunters from across the world and their entourages. Jin-Woo stood beside Jin-Ho, newly returned from the hospital. Curious, Jin-Woo asked softly, "How do you feel?"
Jin-Ho's eyes glistened with unshed emotion. "Better than ever," he replied, voice thick. He confessed, "When I heard you fought Thomas Andre, the Goliath, for my sake, I was deeply moved." Around them, hunters watched in quiet awe, speaking in hushed tones. Though standing right there, Jin-Woo's presence seemed almost invisible, a ghost of unparalleled strength. To them, Jin-Woo wasn't just powerful, he was on a level beyond their comprehension. A man approached with a businesslike smile, introducing himself as the CEO of a global firm specializing in monster remains. "I'm interested in the giants you hunted," he said smoothly. "Do you have time to talk business?" Jin-Woo responded coolly, "I don't handle those matters." He gestured toward Jin-Ho. "The vice chairman of the Arjin Guild handles business affairs." The two men stepped aside, beginning a conversation. Jin-Woo watched with quiet pride, pleased to see Jin-Ho growing confidently into his role. Soon Adam appeared, tablet in hand. He handed it to Jin-Woo. "This is the list," Adam explained. "It contains the top 10 hunters ranked by points, based on contribution, mission success, and activity. These are priority targets. If you choose to help, the Bureau will likely ask you to protect them." Jin-Woo's eyes flicked to the list. Then, with calm curiosity, he asked, "Where do I rank?" Adam chuckled softly, glancing at the tablet. "You're probably ranked 3rd or 4th, he said with a grin. "Mostly because of your performance against the giants." He tapped the screen. Thomas Andre tops the list, followed by Lujagang, then Christopher Reed, and Sid Harth. Jin-Woo skimmed the names quickly, already feeling the weight of memorizing them all. Without a word, he silently dispatched shadow soldiers, silent watchers, sent to each hunter. Through them, he could monitor their conditions and even communicate discreetly. It would help him identify allies and enemies among the rulers, easing the path ahead. Suddenly, the heavy sound of slow footsteps filled the room. A familiar pressure swept through the air as an overwhelming aura approached. Jinchul, standing nearby, leaned in to speak, but Jin-Woo cut him off calmly. "This isn't something to worry about," he said, voice steady. Then Thomas Andre appeared. One arm was encased in a thick cast, a stark reminder of their fierce battle. Thomas approached Jin-Woo, his gaze steady and unyielding. "Doctors and healers have tried, but my arm still hasn't fully recovered," he admitted. "Your magic, it did too much damage." He paused, reflecting on the fight. "Even so, you could have wiped out my entire guild that day," Thomas said slowly. "But no one died, except Hwang Dong-Su, who brought it upon himself." He looked directly at Jin-Woo. "Why did you show such restraint?" Jin-Woo's reply was simple and calm. "Your guild committed no crime worthy of death." That answer seemed to satisfy Thomas. He nodded, respect and understanding mingling in his eyes. "I plan to hold a grand funeral for Dong-Su, not to excuse his actions, but to honor him in death." Turning to leave, Thomas paused. "When my arm heals fully, I hope we can share a meal. Leave your contact with my manager so we can arrange it." Laura stepped forward politely. "Please, may I have your information?" she explained gently. "Thomas wants to send a gift in appreciation." Jin-Woo initially declined. "There's nothing I need," he said. But Laura smiled warmly. "My master is competitive. He hates owing favors. Even a small gift will ease his mind." Jin-Woo considered briefly, then nodded. "A good dagger would do." Laura's smile widened. "Thank you." She followed Thomas out. Once she was gone, Adam returned with the tablet. "Shall we start introductions with the hunters on the list?" Jin-Woo shook his head. "No need." Jin-Woo's eyes flicked over the list once more, pausing on the 6th-ranked hunter. "Who is this?" he asked, noting the conspicuous absence of the name. Adam looked momentarily taken aback. "The Bureau lost contact with him just days before the conference," Adam admitted quietly. "Even the Brazilian government and their secret agencies haven't been able to track him down." Jin-Woo's expression darkened. There was a very real chance the hunter had already been eliminated. With Thomas Andre and Christopher Reed no longer in the picture and one hunter missing, that left only 7 names, 7 more hunters he needed to cast his shadow upon. Meanwhile, the party still raged on in America. But in Korea, night had fallen, draping the city in quiet darkness. Inside the Korean Hunter Association, President Go sat alone at his desk. The soft rustle of paperwork was the only sound. But it wasn't the work or the late hour weighing on him. It was something far heavier. His heart. For some time now, it had refused to beat normally. What started as a subtle discomfort years ago had grown into an unignorable pounding. Not from exertion, but as if sounding an alarm. His end was near. A quiet scoff escaped his lips. Doctors warned him this would happen if he kept pushing himself. He ignored them all.
Fully aware he had long crossed those limits.
It was nothing short of a miracle he was still standing. Suddenly the shrill ring of his phone pierced the silence. He reached for it without hesitation. On the other end, the gentle voice of his wife, soft with concern. "Are you all right?" she asked. Her brief words brought him a rare comfort. Leaning back, he assured her he was finishing up and would be home soon. But midway through his reply, an eerie sensation gripped him. Something felt terribly wrong. His gaze snapped to the window, and what he saw froze him solid. The skyline, the traffic, the city lights, everything had been swallowed by an oppressive black void. Panic crept in. He struggled to make sense of the nightmare unfolding outside. Then at the edge of his vision, a flicker of movement stopped him cold. He turned. There, seated on the couch, as if he owned the room, a man he had never seen before. A faint, cold grin tugged at the corners of his mouth. A chill filled the air, unnatural and otherworldly. The Frost Monarch had arrived. The tension inside the Hunter Association was palpable as Sillard, the Frost Monarch, sat with an eerie calm across from President Go. The chairman's mind raced, struggling to comprehend the sudden appearance of such a dangerous being. There was something ancient, something fundamentally wrong about this creature that twisted his instincts. How had he failed to sense such a terrifying presence earlier? The aura now radiating from the intruder made it unmistakably clear this was no ordinary enemy. President Go knew he couldn't face this threat alone. As panic quietly built within him, Sillard's voice cut through the silence. Calm, cold, and absolute. He informed the chairman that the office had already been sealed off from the outside world. That revelation hit hard, blurring the line between reality and nightmare. But before President Go could fully react, something sharp and fast whipped past his shoulder. A biting chill followed. He looked down to see frost rapidly crystallizing along his suit, forming a jagged trail of ice where the projectile had grazed him. Pain surged beneath the surface as Sillard, unfazed and emotionless, commented on the wound, questioning whether the chairman still believed he was dreaming. Now fully alert, President Go steadied himself and demanded to know the stranger's identity. But Sillard only frowned, disappointment flickering in his voice as he remarked that he had hoped the chairman would recognize him without needing introductions. The confusion remained, but Sillard pressed on, his words laced with contempt. He called President Go a fragment of brilliant light, urging him to awaken his true self. Then, almost mockingly, he added that perhaps the fragment feared its vessel might collapse under the weight of its own power. When President Go gave no response, Sillard's interest waned. His eyes narrowed, and without a word more, he released a devastating burst of icy magic. The explosion surged through the room, shaking the walls and engulfing the office in a dense white fog. The icy fog cloaked everything in sight, but within that freezing haze, Sillard smiled. Two radiant lights pierced through the mist, golden eyes burning with divine power. The fragment of brilliant light had finally awakened. Sillard didn't hesitate. Another blast followed, more precise and lethal, aimed straight at the heart. But this time, President Go reacted. His arm swung with divine force, deflecting the attack and sending it crashing into the wall. The explosion shattered stone and steel, revealing a gaping void beyond. As the mist slowly lifted, President Go stepped forward, his form now enveloped in a luminous golden aura, pulsing with celestial energy. This was no longer the chairman of the Hunter Association. This was the brightest fragment of brilliant light in its true form. The Frost Monarch's gaze sharpened as a grim smile spread across his face. He confessed that he had searched for this power for ages, never realizing it had been hidden inside what he now called a broken vessel. His tone darkened as he revealed the truth. All 7 fragments of brilliant light had been found, and 2 had already been destroyed. His mission now was clear: to witness the proud humiliation of the brightest fragment before ending him. But President Go didn't waver. His roar echoed with unshakable defiance, daring the Frost Monarch to try. Sillard chuckled darkly, amused that a fragment clinging to a decaying vessel dared challenge a monarch who had already mastered his own. With contempt, he questioned whether President Go could even land a single blow. Then, with a thunderous cry, he raised his arms. A colossal wall of jagged ice surged forward, a deadly wave crashing toward its target. President Go dodged at the last second. The ice tore through the space he had just left. With clenched fists he countered.
A golden punch collided with the frost, shattering it into a storm of frozen shards. Without pause, he charged, his fist glowing with power, aiming a devastating strike at Sillard. But the monarch was swift, dodging gracefully and retaliating with a spear of ice that sliced across President Go's shoulder. Blood bloomed from the wound as the chairman staggered. Sillard, overconfident, let his guard drop for just an instant, and President Go saw it. He lunged forward, launching a powerful punch at the exposed opening. But Sillard reacted instantly, conjuring an ice barrier that absorbed the blow. Still, President Go didn't stop. He attacked again and again, pressing forward, trying to spot even the smallest weakness. But Sillard moved like mist, fluid, untouchable. The chamber echoed with the thunder of their clash. Magic erupted with every impact, shaking the very foundation of the structure. President Go's breathing grew heavier. His movements slowed. Every step sent pain searing through his body. He was running out of time. Desperation surged within him as he launched into one final charge.
Chamber echoed with the thunder of their clash. Magic erupted with every impact, shaking the very foundation of the structure. President Go's breathing grew heavier. His movements slowed. Every step sent pain searing through his body. He was running out of time. Desperation surged within him as he launched into one final charge. A golden punch blazed forward, filled with the last remnants of his strength. But Sillid stepped back effortlessly, dodging the strike with chilling ease. The chairman gritted his teeth, frustration burning in his chest. Then the realization struck, harsh and unforgiving. His vessel was breaking. His strength was nearly gone. Sillid stood tall, untouched. What had once been curiosity in his gaze had now turned to something colder. Pity. Then without a word, the monarch vanished and reappeared in the blink of an eye, right before President Go. The chairman barely registered the movement before a spear tore through his chest. Agonizing pain erupted as blood poured from his mouth and he staggered, barely managing to stay upright. Sillid loomed over him, grinning, watching the brilliant fragment begin to crumble. He spoke with eerie calm, almost amused, musing how long it would take to find another vessel. But by the time that happened, he said, the monarchs would have already assembled, and this world would fall before the fragment could return. President Go coughed, blood dripping down his chin, but even in agony, a ragged laugh escaped his lips. Gripping the spear with one hand, he spoke through clenched teeth, insisting he hadn't fought in vain. The Frost Monarch had missed something. Just as the other fragments had failed to anticipate his actions, Sillid too had overlooked what truly mattered. The monarch's eyes narrowed, sensing something off, powerful and unnatural. Suddenly, a colossal burst of mana tore past his face. The explosion behind him rocked the dimension itself, fracturing part of the sealed space. Sillid turned back to President Go with a bitter grin, asking if that was the surprise he had been stalling for. But the chairman simply smiled through the blood, calm and assured. What needed to happen had already begun. A low rumble followed, growing into a deafening crash as the mana barrier Sillid had constructed around the office shattered into pieces like splintering glass. Confusion flickered across the monarch's face. He muttered that a broken barrier wouldn't change anything. But President Go wasn't finished. With the last of his strength, he let out a cry. From beneath him, the shadows rippled, and a figure surged forth in a blur. An ant-like creature darted forward, leaping through the ruined wall with a piercing screech. Sillid's gaze locked onto it, briefly stunned, but he quickly dismissed it as nothing more than a foot soldier from the abyss. It didn't matter, or so he believed, until a terrible realization dawned on him, freezing his expression. This wasn't just any soldier. His eyes widened in horror. He had made a grave mistake. Panic overtook him. He flung President Go's body aside and shot toward the ant, conjuring a sickle of frost mid-air, ready to strike the creature down before it could escape. He reached it in an instant and swung, but the sickle never landed. A hand caught it mid-air, fingers curling around the frozen blade with crushing force. Sillid's eyes went wide as time seemed to freeze. This wasn't the ant anymore. Gripping the sickle like it was nothing stood a figure cloaked in shadows. It was Jin-Woo. His piercing, cold eyes locked onto the Frost Monarch as he seized Sillid by the throat, demanding to know his true identity. Panic flickered in the monarch's eyes. He gasped for breath, but even in that moment, he sensed it. The monstrous shadow army looming behind Jin-Woo like an unstoppable tide. Weariness crept into his gaze. Under his breath, he muttered the name, Shadow Monarch. Then with genuine curiosity and confusion, he asked why, even after amassing such a vast army, Jin-Woo hadn't aligned himself with the other monarchs. The question struck Jin-Woo. His confusion was unmistakable, flashing clearly in his expression. And in that instant, Sillid understood. He finally grasped what President Go had meant in their final moments. A chilling dread began to form in Sillid's chest. Jin-Woo was the piece he had failed to see. Desperate, Sillid gathered energy, a violent surge of cold condensing in his mouth. With a scream of fear and fury, he released a devastating blast of freezing air. Jin-Woo's instincts reacted instantly. He propelled himself backward, narrowly dodging the explosion as a towering ice wall erupted where he had just stood. The sheer force behind the magic confirmed what Jin-Woo already suspected. This enemy wasn't just a monarch, but a dangerously skilled mage as well. Wasting no time, Jin-Woo summoned his twin demon monarch daggers. The blades pulsed with ominous energy as he lunged forward, slicing through the ice with one clean strike. Just as he was about to continue the assault, Sillid raised his hands, not to defend, but to surrender. His voice was steady, unexpected. He claimed he hadn't come to die. This wasn't meant to be a battle to the death. Jin-Woo hesitated, his breath steady but his stance still guarded. Sillid's icy gaze shifted, not to Jin-Woo but to the crumpled figure behind him. Realization dawned. Jin-Woo turned his head and froze. Behind him lay President Go's lifeless body, soaked in blood. The body lay motionless. President Go was barely clinging to life. Without a word, Sillid conjured a massive spear of jagged ice and hurled it straight toward the dying chairman, presenting Jin-Woo with a cruel ultimatum. Jin-Woo's eyes ignited with fury. Instantly, he activated ruler's authority, his mind screaming for the spear to stop. But then a notification flashed in his vision. The Frost Monarch's magic resisted his control. Rage exploded in his chest. With a roar, he slammed his foot into the ground and launched himself forward at blinding speed, tearing through the air toward President Go. The spear shrieked as it cut through the sky, and in one desperate final surge, Jin-Woo reached the chairman's side, intercepting the deadly projectile mid-flight. With a deafening clash of metal and ice, he deflected it just in time, sending the weapon crashing into a nearby marble pillar. The chairman was safe for now. But Jin-Woo's rage had reached a boiling point. His glare locked onto the Frost Monarch, who stood watching with maddening calm. Before Jin-Woo could retaliate, Sillid summoned a swirling black portal behind him and turned to flee. But Jin-Woo wouldn't let him leave unscathed. He summoned a barrage of daggers from his inventory and hurled them in a storm of steel. One found its mark, burying itself deep into Sillid's shoulder. The monarch's body tensed with pain, his face twisting in rage. But he didn't attack. Instead, he stepped closer to the gate and declared coldly that he would return, once Jin-Woo's shadow gates opened again. And with one final venomous taunt, he glanced toward the dying chairman, calling him Jin-Woo's parting gift, a corpse, soon to join his army. The words pierced deeper than any blade. Before Jin-Woo could move, Sillid vanished into the closing portal. Silence fell like a hammer. The magical barrier was gone. Jin-Woo cursed himself. He should have sensed the danger sooner. He turned and rushed to President Go's side. The chairman lay still, his body soaked in blood. Jin-Woo dropped to his knees beside him, heart pounding. This wasn't something a potion could heal. Without hesitation, he called for his most trusted summon, Biru. The shadow warrior tore through space like a lightning bolt, landing beside Jin-Woo in an instant. He dropped to one knee, awaiting command. Jin-Woo's voice was low and urgent. The loyal summon pressed his clawed hands over the chairman's chest, channeling his full magical strength. A radiant healing light surged around them, but nothing changed. Jin-Woo's jaw tightened. From his inventory, he drew a small vial, the holy water of life, a last resort. He leaned in, ready to use it, but before the liquid touched the chairman's lips, a trembling hand reached up and gripped his wrist. President Go's eyes fluttered open, barely. His voice was hoarse and broken as he whispered, telling Jin-Woo to stop. It was already too late. Jin-Woo froze, fighting the urge to protest. But the look in the chairman's eyes, solemn and final, left no room for argument. Through labored breaths, the old warrior offered his gratitude. Jin-Woo had arrived, and that alone was enough. Blood slipped from the corner of his mouth as he spoke of things unseen, of a supreme being, of revelations from beyond, and of a coming war unlike any before. Jin-Woo leaned closer, eyes wide, trying to capture every word, to memorize them before they were lost. President Go's trembling hand squeezed his one last time. His voice was fading, but his message was clear. A time would come when Jin-Woo would face a choice, and he must stand with humanity, no matter what. His voice cracked again as he confessed his deepest regret, not being able to stand beside the younger generation in battle, to protect the world with them. But he held no bitterness. Meeting Jin-Woo had brought him peace, and then his final truth, that his heart, weak and fragile, had endured all this time. just to witness this moment, to see Jin-Woo with his own eyes. His hand slipped from Jin-Woo's grip, falling to the ground with a soft, final thud. It was over. Jin-Woo didn't move. His lips were pressed into a tight line, his eyes locked on the lifeless face of a man he had deeply respected. Baru stood beside him in silence, his head bowed low.